Sermon on Matthew 26, 1 to 5. Matthew records the closing movement of the public ministry of Jesus as the narrative approaches the climactic events that would soon unfold in Jerusalem. The passage reads, open quote, "And it came to pass, when Jesus had finished all these sayings, he said unto his disciples, Ye know that after 2 days is the feast of the Passover, and the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified. Then assembled together the chief priests, and the scribes, and the elders of the people, unto the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas, and consulted that they might take Jesus by subtlety and kill him. But they said, Not on the feast day, lest there be an uproar among the people." Close quote. The opening phrase, "when Jesus had finished all these sayings," marks the conclusion of a major discourse section in the gospel. Throughout Matthew, this formula appears at the end of each teaching block, signaling that Jesus has completed another portion of his instruction concerning the kingdom and its impending fulfillment. The previous discourse had centered on the coming judgment upon the Old Covenant order and the consummation of the age associated with Jerusalem and the temple system. With those words completed, the narrative now turns decisively toward the events that would bring about the transition from the Old Covenant world to the New. Jesus then tells his disciples, after 2 days is the feast of the Passover. The Passover was the central redemptive memorial of Israel. Instituted in Exodus, it commemorated the deliverance of Israel from Egypt through the blood of the Lamb. Each year, the nation rehearsed this redemption through sacrifice, remembering the night when judgment passed over those whose houses were marked with blood. Yet, the Passover itself was never the ultimate reality. It functioned as a shadow anticipating a greater deliverance. The lamb sacrificed annually in Jerusalem pointed forward to a singular sacrifice that would accomplish what the repeated offerings of the law could never fully secure. Jesus identifies himself within that framework. The Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified. The title Son of Man echoes the prophetic vision of dominion and vindication in Daniel. Here, however, the path to that vindication moves through betrayal and crucifixion. The suffering of the Son of Man stands at the center of the divine plan. The timing is significant. Jesus links his crucifixion directly to the Passover. The feast that commemorated Israel's deliverance from Egypt becomes the setting for the greater redemption that would bring the covenant story to its fulfillment. The sacrificial system that had operated for centuries was about to reach its appointed conclusion in the offering of the one to whom it had always pointed. While Jesus speaks plainly about what is about to occur, another scene unfolds simultaneously among the leaders of Jerusalem. Matthew records that the chief priests and the scribes and the elders of the people gathered together in the palace of the high priest, Caiaphas. This assembly represents the ruling authority of the Old Covenant nation. The chief priests presided over the temple sacrifices. The scribes were the interpreters of the law, and the elders represented the governing leadership of Israel. Together they formed the Sanhedrin, the body responsible for maintaining religious order within the covenant community. Their gathering at the high priest's residence indicates that the matter under consideration was of the highest importance. Yet the nature of their discussion reveals the growing hostility toward Jesus. Matthew says they consulted that they might take Jesus by subtlety and kill him. The leaders of Israel were not merely debating theological disagreements. They were conspiring toward the death of the one who had come in fulfillment of the law and the prophets. Throughout the gospel, Jesus had exposed the corruption of the religious leadership and had pronounced judgment upon the temple establishment. Their response now moves from opposition to calculated intent. Their strategy involved subtlety, a plan to arrest Jesus in a manner that would avoid public disturbance. They recognized that Jesus had gained considerable favor among the people, and any open move against him could provoke unrest. Therefore, they concluded, not on the feast day, lest there be an uproar among the people. The irony of their decision is striking. While they attempt to control the timing of events in order to avoid disruption during the Passover, the divine purpose had already determined that the crucifixion would occur precisely in connection with that feast. The leaders seek delay, but the unfolding of redemptive history will not follow their calculations. The Passover itself demands fulfillment. The lamb must be offered at the appointed time. In this brief passage, two plans stand in contrast. On one side stands the deliberate conspiracy of the religious authorities. On the other stands the clear foreknowledge of Jesus concerning the events that are about to occur. The rulers believe they are orchestrating events through political maneuvering, yet the narrative reveals that the death of Jesus is not ultimately governed by their schemes. Jesus speaks of his crucifixion before the leaders have carried out their plan. The betrayal, the suffering, and the death are presented as certain and imminent. What appears outwardly as the triumph of human opposition is in reality the unfolding of a predetermined purpose. The approaching crucifixion would accomplish what the temple system had only symbolized. The sacrifices offered daily in Jerusalem were reminders of sin and temporary provisions within the covenant structure of Israel. The offering of Christ would bring a decisive end to that system by accomplishing the redemption that the law anticipated but could never complete through repeated offerings. Thus, Matthew positions this moment as the threshold of covenantal transition. The Passover approaches, the leaders conspire, and Jesus announces the nearness of his death. The convergence of these elements prepares the reader for the events that follow, where the sacrifice of the Son of Man brings the long story of the Old Covenant to its appointed fulfillment.